Howdy folks, today we're looking at Gen 13 Ordinary Heroes number 1 from 1996 in Image Comics. If you weren't around in the mid-90s, it might be difficult to explain just how big a deal Gen 13 actually were. In the midst of one of the worst bear markets the industry had ever seen, it was one of a handful of true success stories, a second-generation blockbuster from Image that hit at just the right moment to capitalize on fatigue with the generally lackluster diminished returns that had set in with many of the company's founding launch titles. Gen 13 succeeded largely because it was significantly different than anything Image had done up to then. A bit of a cheesecake book in a retail climate where bad girls were fast becoming the only dependable sellers, as well as a character-driven series. Much of the book was comprised of the gang hanging around La Jala and getting into hijinks, the kind of familiar comforts largely eschewed by the over-the-top hysterics of books like Wildcats and Youngblood. Problem was, in the fine Image tradition, they couldn't quite get the book out the door monthly. There was more demand for Gen 13 product than there was Gen 13 product, so they brought in as many people as possible to strike while the iron was hot and flesh out these characters to whom readers had already responded. The issue today marks a special occasion indeed. Not only was it Adam Hughes drawing and writing 2 issues of the hottest characters in the industry, it was Hughes' first bad at writing, period. It does betray some of the telltale signs of the novice writer, inasmuch as it takes a great deal of real estate to tell not a lot of story. But, as opposed to many of the early Image auteurs who stumbled in this arena, those slow pages are filled with character work, real conversations, even jokes. There's some cheesecake, yes. Hughes is under no illusions that anyone buying a Gen 13 comic wants to see Fairchild in various states of distress and undress. But for all that, it's simply gorgeous, one of the nicest looking books Image published during their first decade. Sadly, like much else from the company during this period, their early computer colors ran a bit dark, especially on the newsprint Image was using for their newsstand editions. I have the direct sales version of issue 2, and you can see the difference for yourself next week. Howdy folks, today we're looking at Gen 13 Ordinary Heroes number 2 from 1996 in Image Comics. This is the concluding chapter of Adam Hughes' writing debut, a story about a mysterious menace with surprising ties to the Gen 13 team. There are 2 villains here. In the first place, the actual menace itself, a vaguely Lovecraftian blob beast, a shuggoth in the common parlance, all tentacles and appetite, consuming everything in its path. But the second villain, and a far more insidious foe, is the smokescreen of secrecy from the spy agencies that continually bedevil Gen 13. That's one of the series' consistent themes in every incarnation. Lynch's I.O. knows more about whatever is happening than they let on, invariably to the detriment of anyone else who happens to be involved. In this instance, the bulk of the story is devoted to tracking down the truth of the matter after the team is confronted by and handily bested by the beast on first contact. The team's refusal to play by the same rulebook as the intelligence community that created and tries to control them remains integral to the concept. Gen 13 were rebels against the military-industrial complex, willing at every turn to fight the same shadowy governmental forces that unambiguously mean them harm. So too here, as the team's eventual victory relies on seeing past the spook show and towards the real needs of the people at the heart of the problem. Hughes always puts in the work as a writer whenever he wears that hat. This is more than just an average fill-in. He understands the characters and what makes their world tick in a way that sticks out. No one would have complained had he showed up for 2 issues of fluff. Perhaps some readers would have preferred hijinks at the Bikini Factory. But this isn't fluff. This is actually a bit of a downer as far as Gen 13 stories go. Through it all, of course, Hughes manages to stun with every turn of the page. Even passages of text-heavy exposition are delivered with more imagination and aplomb than you have any right to expect. If you had any doubt that Hughes was already an artist, really less than a decade into his career, there's a brief letter in the back from none other than Charles Vest to prove the point.